My knuckles turn white from squeezing the handle of the basket I'm carrying. The taunts of Diarmaid Flynn and his sons travel across a decade and a half from behind their stone fence in County Cork to terrorise me anew. As the cart begins to overtake me, my breathing quickens. Through the tunnel formed by the brim of my bonnet, the horse's whiskered muzzle comes into view. A glance downward reveals his limp. It's plain to see he needs reshoeing. The driver is a square-shouldered man with a hat pulled low on his forehead. He glances back at me for only a split second as the cart rolls past, but my chest constricts all the same. He resembles one of the Flynns. Except for Seamus and Thomas, all men do. Thoughts of my son push me onward. Since he started boarding with the Muellers a year ago, Thomas has not come home. Today, he must accept our invitation to return, at least to share a meal with us. I wish for his homecoming so hard. It cannot be otherwise. The entire family, Seamus, my sister Biddy, and their children, misses my son. But I miss him more than anyone. His lengthy absence makes it even more difficult to endure my sister's resentments. Her impatience is at the root of our undoing. On the afternoon of Thomas's conception, Biddy's pestering had driven me from Mam and Dad's cottage. If not for her, I would have never braved crossing our road, making my way through the nearby copse of oak and chestnut trees and down to the river, where I found Seamus stricken with grief and bawling over the fresh news of his dad's death. Had Biddy been content to let me grieve quietly over the ruination of my face, Seamus would never have laid his head upon my shoulder. I'd have never rested a hand on his back or kissed his hair. I was only 16. He was 22. Weeks previous, he'd carried me home after beating away the Flynn's dog, whose teeth were tearing at my flesh. When a man saves your life, you save him back. You pick up his burden and bear it as your own. I know it was a sin to lie with my sister's betrothed, but with a face as scarred as mine, you don't pause to weigh moral implications. A thin white line, like a crack in spring ice, begins in the centre of my forehead, then opens wide and slices southeast through my brow. The deep split continues across the bone ridge beneath my eye and ends suddenly where the rounded flesh of my cheek should begin. Across the outside corner of that same eye, a crest of bunched scarlet tissue, measuring 3 fingers, dips over my cheekbone, then narrows and cuts downward through my upper lip. Our union was a sweaty and frenzied event that finished before I'd recovered from the wonder of its beginning. There is a tarnished place in my heart where I lock away fragments of memory. His ragged breath, the scent of damp earth, the bed of moss cushioning my tailbone. It is difficult to unsee the look of mortification that darkened Seamus O'Doherty's face when he crawled from between my legs afterwards and took measure of my disarray. Remorse still swims in his grey eyes sometimes when he looks at me and floods me with shame, although not as much as in the early days after our union. I'd say that I regretted my sin, but then I'd be regretting our creation of the one good thing to come of my life, Thomas. It wasn't until a few years after we'd all immigrated to Upper Canada that the pieces fell in place and Biddy realised Thomas's da is Seamus, not a stranger on the road as I'd claimed. Since that day, Biddy has claimed the domestic realm. I mostly work outside. A line of hurt divides us as clearly as the Rideau Canal cleaves Bytown in two, with the English and gentry of Upper Town to the west, and the poor Irish and French of Lower Town hunkered along the opposite bank. We don't discuss our situation. What can be done? Biddy swore an oath to Mam and Da before we stepped off the dock at Cork all those years ago. She promised to take me in and make sure no harm befell me, and to raise my unborn child as her own in this new land of fresh beginnings where no one knew us.